Hey folks, it's Stefan, back again with another episode of the Gamer's Companion to Music. Today we're going to dive headfirst into the wild world of Pokemon. Now as you know, the Pokemon world is massive, so we're going to do things just a little bit differently today. Normally we look at just one single game and its music, but with this franchise we're going to see how the many different games look at just one concept at a time. This episode is going to be all about the gym leader battle music. How did that music evolve over the course of 19 years and how has it stayed the same? By the end, I hope you'll be ready to fire up your old Game Boys and tackle them all yourself. Pokemon as a series spans 19 years as of this video. Much of the game's musical direction can be credited to composer Junichi Masuda. He also began to contribute much to the game's design, including naming and design for several Pokemon. The music for the most part is forever ingrained into our brains, mostly just from the sheer amount of time spent playing the game. Let's be honest with ourselves, how many Pokemon games do you own? I own almost all of them, and I can tell you I've got at least 100 hours logged in 3 or 4 of the games. The player subconsciously becomes one with the music without even knowing it. The focus today, however, is on the specific music for gym leaders throughout the games. The 8 gym leaders are essentially your boss fights, and the battles are a good barometer of how well you are progressing through the game. The music for the gym leaders is unique by game, which heightens the sense of importance in the battle you're about to undergo. There have been many games, but there have only been 6 gym leader themes. The music for each region stays the same, but is reorchestrated or rearranged for each successive game that appears in that region. For example, the gym leaders from the Kanto region, where Pokemon Red and Blue take place, exist in 5 different games. Everything about the music for that region then is the same in terms of melody and harmony, but the music takes on a way different flavor based on the new arrangement, and or the capabilities of the newer handheld systems. Obviously, the Nintendo DS music is going to be more intricate and better synthesized sounds can be created compared to the original Nintendo Game Boy. Of course, when you're talking about this sort of thing, it's only natural to rank the music in order from most to least favorite, so here it is. I love the Kanto theme with all my heart, and that will forever be number 1 on my list, followed closely by the music from the Sinnoh region. Third is the Johto region, followed by Hoenn, then the Unova region with the Kalos region bringing up the rear. But I'm not going to go in order of my list today. I'm going to go in chronological order. We're going to start with the one that started it all in Kanto, with the Red and Blue gym leader music. What is probably the most striking thing about entering a Pokemon battle is the iconic downward chromatic feature that calls us to battle. We all know it when we hear it, even if we can't eloquently explain it. You know it, right? I'll play an example. So the Red and Blue gym music starts with this, and if you can believe it, not all of the gym battles do. It's the call to battle, how could it not be there? Well, nevertheless, the Game Boy Pokemon music doesn't really use percussion or noise tracks as we know them in the NES, so all of the rhythmic elements have to be created by musical lines. You'll hear many ways this is solved through this video, but this particular gym music uses tons of streams of running notes underneath fairly simple melodic lines to create that driving and oddly flowing pulse throughout. The result is quite amazing. The first section has this positive feeling to it, and then the second section shifts to the sense of impending danger. How? Well, the first part is in a major key, while the second shifts over to a minor key. Also, listen to the background accompanimental figure at the beginning, and then right before it repeats back to the first melody. Did you notice how they're the same? That's how the first melody is set up again, as if it has a whole new intro. You'll also hear that a lot in these gym leader themes. I think the reason why this sounds so different from the rest is that it sounds like there's reverb on the track. I'm not sure what creates this, but it makes the music sound bigger than it really is. So that's the Red and Blue version, but we also hear this theme in other games. Listen to the differences. In Gold and Silver, the accompaniment changes completely. No longer do those 16th note streams happen, and the chords underneath the melody are actually changing too. Did you notice how the first melody doesn't really seem all that heroic anymore? By changing the chords underneath the same melody, you can create something that feels totally different. Now listen to the opening of this. Sound familiar? Listen to the Pokemon main theme. Aha! You sly bastard. These type of musical quotes give the game and the entire series continuity. You hear the same themes coming back, you know you're in the Pokemon world. Fire Red and Leaf Green sounds much more like the music from Ruby and Sapphire, mostly because they were using the same hardware in the Game Boy Advance. The music is basically the exact same as the Red and Blue music, but the instruments could not be any more different. Now don't worry, I'm going to play them all back to back after this section. Of course, the theme returns in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. The arrangement is of the Gold and Silver version, which makes a lot of sense since this game is basically an update. Once again, the main difference is the choice of instruments. New hardware is going to call for new sounds, and I think they do this very well in this version. The Fire Red and Leaf Green version, it seems like they're just using all the instruments in the bank just to use them, while Heart Gold finds a nice balance of fresh sounds to revive the theme. All of the gym leader themes return in black and white too, being able to play against most of the old gym leaders from other regions. It's kind of hard to describe why I'm not so much a fan of this one. It might be that the percussion doesn't feel right to me underneath the melodies. You get this hi-hat sense throughout, and then every once in a while the synth bass gives you this quasi-bass drum pedal, and it just doesn't agree with me for whatever reason. It's obviously a matter of opinion, so if you love this version, just disregard me here. So that's Kanto. Here are all of those themes back to back just to give you an idea of how they change. There sure is a lot going on. The Johto theme also starts out with the call to battle, as I like to call it. I also really like the Game Boy version of this theme. There's a driving pulse through the whole thing that gets set up in the beginning before the main melody starts. The melody is fairly simple, but put on top of the accompaniment, it sounds pretty intense. By itself, it might not. It's all about what happens underneath. Another thing that happens is that you get a secondary melody that is very high in range, that kind of rises and explodes out of nowhere. What's cool about this is that there is a rising harmonic line that goes up by 1/2 step each measure, that steps up the melody and soars out of the texture, heard here. The Heart Gold and Soul Silver version uses the percussion very well. I'm just not so much a fan of the melodic instrument choices. I really am a sucker for that Game Boy sound. It's still, though, a very intense orchestration, and it keeps the ferocity of the moment quite well. Right before that second melody explodes out of the texture, the music just cuts out completely under the melodic line, and it sets up that moment so well. The percussion kicks right back in, and it's much more effective than in the original version. Now I'm gonna put this bluntly. The black 2 and white 2 version of this sucks. I hate it. One of the things I look for in music is when the melody gets sort of buried underneath everything else, my ears get turned off to the music completely. I'm not a fan of the instrument choices at all, and I think they've got the balance all wrong here. Am I saying I could do it better? No way. But I think the melody is what should shine, and either way, it sounds just way too synthy for me. Here are all your Johto versions back to back to back. Listen, now I know that Hoenn is 4th on my list, but you've got to understand that Hoenn's gym leader music is also awesome. I just like the Kanto, Sinnoh, and Johto regions better. Once again, it starts with that call to battle. But what makes this theme really great is the instrumental diversity. Throughout Ruby and Sapphire as a game, the choices the composers had in instruments really opened up the possibility. Now I know I've hated on some of the instrument choices in other themes, but I really like how unique the instruments are in this version. The melody is very singable, and it really does get stuck in your head, too. This is the version where I think the arrangements really did the original justice in all cases. The black and white 2 reprise sounds like they took into consideration what instruments were used in the original, and tried to emulate those sounds while bringing a new percussive take on the accompaniment. I do prefer the original, but I definitely don't cringe when I hear this version. The Omega Ruby arrangements are straight awesome. The 3DS has the most advanced music capacity, and it really does show. You start to feel like the music was composed for a synth orchestra, complete with horns and strings and the whole lot. The percussive elements are there, but they're hidden in the texture so that you feel them more than you hear them. If you listen to a bunch of different versions, you'll get exactly what I mean. Now here are all the Hoenn versions back to back. Sinnoh's music? Amazing. The utilization of the expanded music capabilities of the DS at the time is wonderful, and the melody is just baller. Oh, should I use a musical term instead? The melody uses elements from both the major and minor scales to create this sort of hybrid that sounds just insanely awesome. Now feel free to disagree, but I could have that playing in most battles in most games and I'd be just fine. The other really cool part before the melody even happens is that the call to battle does not use downward motion like all the others. The chord progression rises while the 16th notes remain at the same pitches. It's a really cool effect that sets up a bass line complete with grace notes and some soul to it. Another interesting element is that the second time through, the melody is rewritten to include some ornamentation, so that your ears don't bore of it with the exact same thing happening every single minute. Listen to the difference. Once again, I feel like the Black 2 reprise tried to do just too much with it. There's a lot of flange-type sounds, and the instrument choices don't accentuate the melody as much as I'd like it to. It sounds more like it's out of a techno dance party than a Pokemon game. Here's the difference, and you can decide for yourself. One thing that Unova has going for it is that I think there's slightly more depth and intricacy to the music than in most of the other games. There's a lot of instrumental diversity, and I really do like that chord progression. There's just one spot that really loses me, and it's right here after most of the melodies have already happened. I will say, though, that the beats that get set up really do rock, and they're diverse enough that you get multiple grooves going on with the music. It's probably the best gym leader theme from a percussive sense, but as you know by now, I'm more of a melody person. The Black 2 version is pretty similar to this theme, and honestly, I think it's better from a melodic sense, but lacking slightly in the percussion department. Really though, think about how much harder it would have been to rearrange the same theme. You're given the same set of hardware, but now you have to find a different way to do the exact same thing. In the other arrangements, for the most part, they were working with updated and expanded hardware capabilities. So for that, I really think they did a really nice job at making it different enough from the original. Here are both Unova tracks as a comparison. Now we move on to the Kalos region, which pretty much just went a completely different direction with the music entirely. The X and Y gym music is all about harmony and the beat. The melody is in a guitar sound, and it's really hidden in the texture until about halfway through. Sometimes departures from the norm are a good thing, but when it comes to Pokemon battles, I'm looking for something somewhat driving with a really catchy melody. They went all out with the driving techno feel, but at the expense of melody almost completely. If nothing else though, you can agree that it has a completely different style than any of the other gym leader music battles. And there you have all of the Pokemon Gym Leader battle music. There's a lot to digest here, and we've only just cracked the surface of the Pokemon series. Imagine just how much music is packed into almost 20 years of games. The Gym Leader battle music is very unique, and I think it's one of the best parts of the music in Pokemon. Plus, it doesn't cause physical harm like Lavender Town either. Always a plus. And that about wraps it up for this edition of the Gamer's Companion to Music. I'm Stefan, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you next time. You've got questions, we've got answers. Make sure to comment if you do. We love hearing from you. And if you want to see more in the future, don't forget to subscribe.